Okay, so now on to the exciting stuff, our favorite books we read. Oh my god, I'm so excited. So to start with my favorite book of the year, well, all my top 3, there's not like 1, 2, and 3. It's like they're all equal. They're not in any particular order. But the first book I want to talk about is From Blood and Ash by JLA, which is something we mentioned in our least favorites. I loved this book. I just thought it was so fun, and like it just gave me everything I wanted in like a kind of trashy, like fantasy new adult book. Like just like
I remember finishing it and then immediately texting you saying, I have a book that you are going to absolutely adore. Yeah. And then you finished it and you're like, it was everything.
It was everything I wanted. It just gave me everything. It was like, it was pretty fast paced. It was a little bit slow in the beginning, but again, kind of has to build the world. It has, like, you know, this somewhat strong female lead, the steamy guy. Like, I talked about this book in a previous video, but, I mean, I'll talk about it again because that's how good it was. In From Blood and Ash, we follow our main character, Poppy, and she is the maiden, and she is sheltered basically her entire life. She's not supposed to really see people, touch people, and she is, you know, supposed to remain a maiden. And when kind of bad things happen at the castle she's living in, she is assigned a new guard for her protection, and he is steamy and he's sexy and he
really is
everything Poppy wants and everything she can't have as the maiden. And I don't want to go any more into it because I don't want to give anything away, but it's so good. It's so good. And I'm about to start the second book in the series and I'm so excited for it. Yeah, if you like Sarah J. Maas, if you like Danielle Jensen's The Bridge Kingdom, if you like anything like that, just read it.
I think what I love about it, and I think this is what I talked to you about, was that I was just completely surprised. And
it's shocking. You honestly, like, I saw a few of the things coming, but not the whole thing.
Yeah, the misdirection was like next level.
And and also I liked how she tried to put a slightly different spin on it than like the typical like vampire. Like there's this thing called Ascension. There's these like creatures, and like, you know, they're like some type of mythical, fantastical creature, but you don't know exactly what it is. And I just thought that was a little bit different than like, there's vampires.
She doesn't even use the word vampire until there's 100 pages left.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know they were talking about vampires until there was 100 pages left. She totally pulled a fast one on me.
Yeah. So it's really good. It's like, it's steamy, it's fun, there's an adventure.
A lot of mystery.
Oh, yeah, mystery.
A lot of questions.
Yeah, and a surprise, and hotness, and just needing more. We need more.
Yes, I agree. So much love.
So, highly recommend.
And the second one.
Honestly, stop watching this video to read that book.
Yeah. So, I like to read a ton of different genres. I obviously really like fantasy as well, and YA and NA. So one of my favorite books, and I try to think a little bit outside the box, was The Bear and the Nightingale, which is the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden. And this book and the series in general focuses on Vasilisa Petrovna, or Vasya. I know, very Russian.
That's like in Vampire Diaries when her name is Katerina Petrova.
Oh my god, I just got to that part. Actually, I'm rewatching the series right now.
I love Vampire Diaries. If you need a good TV show, watch that right now.
Damon
and Somerhalder.
Yeah, for real. So, she grows throughout the series, and the first book is on her adolescence and her childhood and her upbringing. And Vasya's always had a really unique connection to the environment around her. She's one of the only people who can see the old gods. So they appear animalistic to her, and a lot of times they are very simple in nature, but other times not. And they're more complicated. So after her mother dies, her father remarries a very devout woman, and they live right outside Moscow. So Russia is very much a part of this, and the weather and the climate is very much involved. So he marries a very devout woman, and this begins a lot of conflict in the household between the older and the newer religions and the connections to environment. And I really liked Vasya because she was really a feminist protagonist and really feminist character. And she's trying to figure out her role and how she can go beyond the societal norms that are expected of her in medieval Russia. And she's definitely, I think, because of her connection to nature, and she's able to see these older, more mythical beings, and she has just a deeper understanding of the world around her. is able to see the bigger picture in a lot of things. And the book itself really delves into blind, pious fanaticism, which is a huge danger in this book, because if you're blinded by anything, you fail to see a lot of the other obstacles that are going on, and I don't want to give any spoilers. So what I love about this series, and it's really similar to Uprooted by Naomi Novik, is that it is very whimsical and magical, and it feels almost like a fairy tale steeped in Russian folklore.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and I really love that I feel like I'm learning a little bit about Russia's history, even if it is like a fantasy viewpoint on it. So I really like the first book because Vastia's fight is really a singular level that will change as the series progresses, but it's really just her fight for freedom and independence in the first book. And I kind of enjoy stories where it's not the whole world is at stake.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be like everyone will die if I don't accomplish it.
Yes.
Yeah. Because stakes don't always have to be so high.
Those kind of stories aren't relatable.
Yeah.
You need to read sometimes just these stories of a small town girl right outside Moscow, Russia, and like learning her role in life. And I really enjoyed it in that sense. So the third book in the series, though, was my favorite because it really elicited this emotional reaction that I wasn't prepared for. So I started off the series kind of, whatever, I'm into this.
Yeah, like you liked it, wasn't amazing.
It really snuck up on me. And by the end of the book, I cared so deeply, or by the end of the series, I cared so deeply for these characters. And I was weeping. All the emotions were coming out. I'm not super emotional usually. It really was bringing everything out in me. And those are my favorite kind of books, the ones that like really create this lasting emotion. I remember the experience of reading it more than I do remember all the tiny details, and that's why I really think I'd recommend it.
So my next favorite book that I read this year is The Traitor Queen by Danielle Jensen, which is the second book in the Bridge Kingdom series.
I know.
It's so good. I love the whole series. I love The Traitor Queen. I love just everything about the world. Like, I just can't. Honestly, I just can't. It's so good. So it's a brief summary of Bridge Kingdom, so I don't give anything away if you haven't read that book. But we follow our main character, Lara, who is basically married off to a king of a foreign country. And she is sent there under, like, the disguise that the countries are going to form this alliance, when in reality she is there to infiltrate the city and bring it down from within. And she's taught growing up that this king of Ithacana is the country, is this horrible guy. He sucks. I've talked about this in previous videos, so if you want just a longer description, I'll leave a link down below to that video. But when she gets there, basically she realizes everything she was taught is a lie and he's actually a really great guy. However, things don't just work out that easy. And our first book leaves off as a cliffhanger, and our second book picks up right where that book leaves off. And
I agree.
It's so good.
There was a point in the book where I was just going, no, because you know something bad is about to happen. You see it unfolding. You're like, I don't want this for these characters because you're so emotionally invested in them.
So good. So I read Bridge Kingdom in a day, and I read Traitor Queen in a day. I read Traitor Queen in probably about 8 hours because I just sat down and read the whole thing. It's not that long, so it's like not that impressive, but
I'm impressed though.
It's so good. It's just like, I really felt like it was kind of one continual story. It probably could have been one really long book, but I'm kind of happy that she left it off where the kind of like cliffhanger moment is, because if it was one big book, you would have been like really upset like for a moment, but then you would have been able to keep reading, whereas because I had to wait, it just like built up the excitement so much more. And I just love everything about this series. I like how like good things happen, bad things happen. I love the characters. I think that Danielle Jensen does a really good job of like building the characters and building the world, but doing it in a really like succinct way where I feel like she doesn't waste words. She's not like wasting our time reading. She really just gets right to the point, but I didn't feel like there's not enough. If anything, it's short because I just want more. I just love it so much. I want more, but it's not like I'm confused and I need more, if that makes sense. The romance is so good. The steaminess is so good. Just the right amount of like, whoop! But not too much where you're like, You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I do.
But yeah. Highly recommend, honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
it was a really fun read.
It's fun, right? It's enjoyable.
Yeah. And there's twists that I could see coming, but I was still surprised by.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe that.
Good twist. Good twist where you're like, it wasn't too surprising, but you're like,
yeah.
Good choice.
Like, I'm sad that happened, but this is gonna create some interesting stuff.
And also, I thought, like, she had some clever moments, too, where in the second book, it, like, brought it back to the first book, where, like, something happened in, like, the beginning of the first book, and then it happens in the second book, and you're like, oh, that was clever. So
for my second pick of my list of favorite books, I wanted to pick something that was really enjoyable and breezy to read.
I love those books.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just nice.
So when I want to read something really easy and light, I tend to gravitate towards contemporary romance.
I also find that historical romance fulfills that as well.
Yes, but what I dislike about historical romances is that they talk conversationally how people in present day talk, but they're doing like old stuff. It doesn't make sense to me a lot of times.
That's fair.
My favorite contemporary romance that I've read this year is called You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogel, and it focuses on Naomi and Nicholas, and it is about their relationship.
It makes sense. It's a romance.
It makes sense. Yeah, I know. Big curveball there. So from the outside, it looks like they have the perfect relationship and the perfect engagement. They even have this cute Instagram hashtag for all their pictures. But if you met them in person, you would not know this at all. So their relationship is completely falling apart. And
so it's like, it's fake for social media?
Yes.
Oh, that's really relevant.
It's relevant. After a while, she thinks that she's being a great actress and that she's feigning interest in this relationship so that she doesn't have to foot the bill of the wedding and all these things that his mother wants her to wear and to do and to have on the wedding day. She's really lost control over the whole thing. She thinks that he's as invested as she is faking it, but after a while it becomes evident that he's not into it either, and basically a game of relationship chicken ensues as to see who will be the first one to back out of the relationship.
That's kind of annoying.
Okay, so I will say that they are both kind of assholes in the beginning. They're complete douchebags and super childish, but they use pranks as a way to get closer to each other, and this is their way of trying to get the other person and end the relationship, and it is just so funny.
Wait, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Through this like kind of joking way to end their relationship, do they end up falling back in love?
It is a story about falling back in love. Yes.
We know.
And I think in contemporary romances, a lot of the times it's easy to see how people meet and then you see them right off into the sunset and you just assume they have a happily ever after. But they don't really show like the next year or the next 5 years down the road. And I think this book really gives a good sense of that. So relationships aren't always easy, obviously. And they take a lot of work, and they both discover that they need to appreciate each other more and I guess put more effort into the relationship. But it's so funny, and the characters themselves are hilarious, and it takes place in mid-America in Wisconsin.
Go Whalers!
So it falls into all these tropes, but it is a refreshing spin on all of the well-known things that we loved. Yeah. And falling back in love, I think, and putting work into a relationship is just such a relevant thing, especially,
and not giving up just because it gets hard.
Yeah. And they discover that they actually like their true selves once they
stop being fake.
Once they stop being fake, once they start really connecting more and going outside their comfort zone with each other. So it was so much fun. It was my favorite contemporary romance of the year. So
I also like how it seems like super realistic, and how like there's so many couples that probably fake it for social media and try to put this like front out to the world that they're so perfect.
Yeah.
When behind the scenes, it's just not even anything like that. So I think that's just like really I just like how it's like actually a realistic situation that could be happening that probably is happening to people like everywhere. But I also like how that doesn't mean that it can't be remedied. Mm-hmm. And that they don't truly care for each other, and like even though they have these problems and they're putting on this front, doesn't mean that they can't work on the problems and kind of become the couple that they're pretending to be.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, it's just such a realistic portrayal of a relationship. I mean, obviously there's not all the elements are relatable, but also the pranks were hilarious and they gave me a lot of ideas. So I really like that. I thought it was really funny. Okay, so 2 thumbs up. definitely recommend.
So the last book on my favorites list is actually a series, and it's the Bringing Down the Duke series by Evie Dunmore. And again, these are books that I've talked about before because I love them so much. This year I was able to read both the books in the series, which is Bringing Down the Duke and A Rogue of One's Own. They're honestly just both really good, and they actually focus on two different main characters. So in our first book, we focus on our main female protagonist, Annabelle, and in our second book, our main character is Lucy, but they're like part of the same friend group. They become friends in the first book, and then you learn about Annabelle's story in the first book, and then second book, you learn about kind of Lucy's story. And in this world, we're in the 1800s England, and our main female protagonists are part of the women's suffrage movement. So they're kind of like these badass women who are trying to fight basically for women to have more power and have more of a voice when it comes to voting. So basically they're trying to amend the law that basically says when a woman marries, she loses the right to vote, and essentially she loses her entire voice and she just becomes property of her husband. In the first book, Annabelle kind of meets her man, and she kind of convinces him to maybe see a little bit from their point of view, instead of kind of just going with the status quo. And the second book is similar in the way that Lucy kind of meets a man and tries to kind of convince him that just because it's the way things are now doesn't mean it's the way it has to be. But I just like how even though that the base of the stories are very similar, like what happens in the individual books is very different. And I just thought they were really fun. You know, they have funny banter, they have steamy, romance, the build. I love the sexual tension and build up of the relationships. It's just kind of speeding through the pages to see when they finally just give in, and it's just fun. When I read these books, I feel like I'm watching a movie, and I see it in my head, and you just fly through them, and you're just like, that was good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You finish it, and you're like, I'm excited for the next one. So I would definitely recommend these books, especially if you're not a huge fantasy person and you don't really love the fantastical elements of fantasy books. Then I think these books are definitely for you.
Yeah, and I think it's always refreshing to read about women's rights. Yeah. And I will say a really common trope in historical romances is that the female character is a virgin and the man shows the ways or whatever, and it's really refreshing where a woman is not defined by her sexuality throughout this book, and she really takes hold of it and isn't afraid to go after what she wants.
Yeah.
And especially in historical romances, you don't see a lot of that.
I just love it. I just think that it's it gives you everything you want from a historical romance, but it also just has those
it has more depth to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Historical romance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely recommend.
Okay, so for my last book of this list, I decided to think outside the box again, and I picked a psychological thriller. But this book in particular was a reading experience that was truly unto itself. I've never read a book like this before. So on the surface, the book is about a female narrator who goes on a road trip with her boyfriend to meet his parents. And she's having serious doubts about the relationship.
I'm already getting Get Out vibes.
So it's kind of like Get Out, but not really. The parents, they're unsettling. So the tagline of the book is, "You'll be scared, but you don't know why." And that totally relates the entire time. You are just feeling, myself in particular, I went from feeling kind of bored to uncomfortable to nervous to unsettled to aghast is the only way to describe it. It was a real roller coaster of emotion while I was reading it.
All the emotions, all the
emotions.
feelings.
And it's really short. It's around 200 pages. So
I read it. Short.
Yeah, I read it one night, and then the next night I reread it because I felt like
I read it twice in 2 days.
I felt like I needed to understand it better. And the way the story ends is kind of this meta line from the author saying, but you'll understand it better if you start from the beginning. So even the author recommends for you to reread a story with the knowledge of what's happening. It's kind of like The Sixth Sense. If you know the twist ending, then you watch the whole movie, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I can see the signs.
You pick out the things that you didn't know to look for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can see all these minor details that were unsettling in the beginning, but now are clues to the bigger, grander picture. So because of that, I had to include it in this list because I haven't stopped thinking about it since. When I went through it the second time, I was taking a pen, I was underlining quotes, I was drawing allegories, I was taking little notes. I was trying not to spoil anything in case anybody ever borrowed my copy, but I was just trying to connect all these things that I still have questions. I still don't fully understand, and it sounds kind of hoity-toity the way you're like, oh, is everything an allegory for something else? But the way the book explores intense loneliness, sadness, and the absolute necessity for human relationships in your life, it's just really profound. And the whole book is basically trying to answer this question that you can either take in a certain context or a more negative light. And I just think it's a really interesting experience that I have not had before.
It sounds like it could potentially even be like a different experience depending on the person, which is really different. Like normally with a book, you read it and like everyone kind of gets the same like experience, same takeaways from it. But this is kind of like every person can have a different experience reading it. Yeah,
and I think depending on your emotional state, you'll either connect more to a character or not. And I definitely don't want to give anything away because if I say anything, it's so short. Yeah. Or you could go watch the movie. I have not seen it yet.
Oh, a movie. That's
on Netflix, yeah. Okay, so I would recommend that book because it was totally interesting, totally unique experience, and I like things that make me think and keep me wondering about them days after, which I clearly did because I reread it the next day. So
yeah, so that's all the books we have. Those are our favorite and least favorite books that we've read this year. Let us know in the comments down below if you read any of these books and if you like them, if you didn't like them. If you do end up picking up any of these books, let us know. We'd love to get your thoughts on them.
Yeah.
But that's really all we have for this video. A special thanks to Maddie for sitting down with me.
Thank you for having me.
Sharing her favorite and least favorite books. It's so great because we do have such a similar style when it comes to like fantasy and new adult and all that stuff. But I think that Maddie definitely branches out a little bit more than me, which is great to give you guys some new recommendations, but to also push me, hopefully, to get out of my comfort zone and kind of explore different genres that maybe I wouldn't normally pick up.
Yeah, well, I just always enjoy our in-depth conversations and analysis of these books that we're reading, because you're the only person I go to basically.
We literally text
books.
We literally text daily about the books we read.
There's no one else I could talk to about this stuff.
Yeah, but that's all we have. So please like this video. Please subscribe if you aren't already, and I'll catch you in my next video.
Bye.